of Good Morning Nigeria as we examine our conversation segment, the high cost of election litigation. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
I am Kieran Umayo, also welcoming you to this edition of Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. And of course, we're going to be bringing you other segments that will make the show for today, business news, newspaper review, and of course, sports. For the early morning news, we have Comfort Amadi. She just resumed and she's looking so fresh. Hello, Comfort.
Hello, Kieran. Good morning, Kingsley. Now let's get to the news of the day. African leaders have begun a brainstorming session in Aswan, the Arab Republic of Egypt. The forum seeks African-led solutions to the problems confronting the continent for sustainable peace and development. President Muhammadu Buhari is leading Nigeria's delegation to the forum, which has its theme Peace, Progress and Prosperity.
It is indeed the responsibility of this generation of African leaders, policymakers and intellectuals to provide the homegrown solutions that the continent so desperately needs to protect present and secure future generations to come.
Security is fundamental. Without it, we cannot have any peace. So I think it behoves on all of us in the international community to figure out how we can help countries to address these exogenous security shocks that are independent of Africa, by the way.
And President Muhammadu Buhari has made a strong representation to African leaders to take the part of honor by ensuring that the continent minimizes reliance on donor funding for the execution of vital peace, security and development agenda at the opening session of the Aswan Forum for Sustainable Peace and Development. The president said Africa must take its destiny into its own hands.
Nigeria is not only host to our sub-regional body ECOWAS, but has also been supporting substantially the ECOWAS budget up to about 60%. Africa would need to heavily invest in education as a key tool for the transformation and repositioning of our continent. Education creates opportunities and holds the key for a better and prosperous future.
And back in Nigeria, the Federal Executive Council has approved more than 40 billion naira for road projects in Kano and Bauchi states. This forms part of the major deliberations at its meeting this Wednesday.
The other was the approval of two routes, the Tagwaye-Karasa road to Doguwa in Kano for 8.436 billion and the Alkalere to Futuk road in Bauchi state for 32.015 billion. These are roads that were in the 2019 budget, so this is part of the implementation of the 2019 budget.
Vice President Yemi Osinbajo says the collaboration of state authority and traditional rulers is imperative in the functioning of community policing. This was at the opening of the 11th Assembly of the National Council of Traditional Rulers of Nigeria in Abuja. The Vice President says this alliance is important as the royal fathers have more knowledge of the ways of their people better than the security agencies.
The vast network of confidence open to traditional institutions are uniquely positioned to provide government with valuable intelligence that can help detect criminal activity early and prevent or stop it before it escalates.
There should be, and that I think is one law that will protect the dignity, respect of international ruler, whether it's first class or 100th class.
And from the National Assembly, we hear that the Senate has considered the issue of youth unemployment in Nigeria as an urgent matter for national concern and therefore called for the declaration of state of emergency on the persistent problem.
To urge the federal government, through the Minister of National Planning, to put up a mechanism and program that will provide employment for our teeming unemployed graduates in all tiers of government.
I think the theater of action for solving the problem of unemployment in Nigeria is actually resident in the states. When it comes to employment, they tell you they can't take anybody above 25. And most of them had been looking for a job for the last 6 years.
Those in favor of prayer 4 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.
And the looming nationwide shutdown of electricity supply effective midnight Wednesday is threatened by National Union of Electricity Employees has caught the attention of the House of Representatives. To avert this, the lawmakers during plenary decided to engage union representatives on the issue.
Having exhausted every avenue for resolution of the dispute, has no other option than to withdraw services without further notice.
21 days ultimatum was given. 20 days into that, ultimatum, Ministry of Labour has not done anything.
Clerk, we invite the ministers of power, labor, and the DG pensions, because you mentioned pensions as part of their grievances, to meet with the leadership of the House 2 p.m. tomorrow.
And away from the National Assembly, the federal government says it remains committed to the respect of the nation's judiciary. Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, stated this during a visit to the Chief Judge of the Federal High Court, John Soho.
We have multiple cases and more serious cases than that of Showere pending before the courts generally. We have an established tradition of respect for the sanctity of the court, for the sanctity of the courtroom and court premises, respect and interest for the independence of the judiciary. So our credentials relating to legislative process, our credentials relating to upholding the independence of the judiciary, I think speaks to us as a government.
And that's the news for now. Good morning, Nigeria. I'll be right back with Kinsley and...
If you just joined us, this is Good Morning Nigeria. Now, federal government takes strategic steps to sensitize stakeholders on the essence of appropriate audit and record keeping. Plus, CBN Deputy Governor Adamu appointed chairman of Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, AMCON. Details on business news.
To ensure transparency, probity and accountability in the public service, the Auditor General of the Federation has initiated a workshop to sensitize stakeholders on the essence of proper audit and record keeping in the discharge of their duties. The two-day workshop is designed to afford participants the opportunity to exchange ideas and sort ways of implementing global best practices in the audit of government affairs, both at the national and subnational levels.
You will agree with me that today, more than 75% of the revenue of this country comes from the extractive industry. So we want to reposition the office. We have carved out a unit in the office that will focus on auditing issues relating to the extractive industry. All this is to see that we maximize the benefit derivable for the benefit of the Nigerian people.
Meanwhile, CBN Deputy Governor Adamu has been appointed as chairman of Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, AMCON, as Mohammed Nami set to head Federal Inland Revenue Service, FRS. And in the meantime, the Nigerian Stock Exchange, NSE, forecasts inflow of 200 billion naira capital into the insurance sector post-recapitalization. The Chief Executive Officer of the NSE, Oscar Onyema, says there would be a 400% increase in the minimum capital required for life insurance companies, 333% for non-life insurance companies, 360% for composite insurance companies, and 200% for reinsurance companies. Onyema said the NSE would support insurance operators to meet the new capital requirements stipulated by the National Insurance Commission.
As of Q3 2019, the insurance sector contributed less than 1% to the GDP of Nigeria, having a penetration rate of 0.31% and an insurance density of 6.2%, the Nigerian insurance industry still lags behind its African counterparts.
To play both by the regulator and the operators in driving customer awareness and education. That's something that needs to go hand in hand with this. Investment in technology, investment in increasing distribution to further increase penetration is also something that's very important. It's obviously the increase in capital will afford the ability to be able to do this.
And the capital market records an increase by 0.19% amid negative breath.
All right, many thanks, Comfort, for the business package on Good Morning Nigeria. Next for us is Newspaper Review.
We welcome Bayo Atebi for today's review. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kiriam. Good morning. Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's begin our review this morning from the New Telegraph newspaper. New Telegraph, above the nameplate, is nationwide blackout as power grid collapses. Electricity workers shut down IE, EKD's distribution company offices. End strike and negotiate, NECA urges union. That's the Union of Electricity Employees. Now, below the nameplate of the New Telegraph, you have 4 headlines. Senate advocates living stipends for unemployed Nigerians. That's page 3. Catholic bishops kick against contraceptives and post-abortion care. Page 5. Minimum wage, no room for excuses or delay. NLC wants governance. And federal government orders probe into DSS court invasion. That's on page 2. Now, the lead story says, with the kicker, NSA, that's National Security Advisor, unthinkable things occurred in Kogi and Bayelsa polls. And you can see the writers there, admits governorship elections were disasters. But the Inspector General of Police says election peaceful, but 49 suspects arrested for violence. And INEC tasks stakeholders on free and fair elections. Kieran.
All right, let's go to the Blueprint newspaper. Blueprint newspaper, below the nameplate. Aswan Forum, peace key to achieving rapid development in Africa, says President Buhari. And now, court invasion, federal government raises panel on Shawore. It's on page 8. El-Rufai has made Kaduna mini Nigeria, says Obasanjo. That story is on page 6 of the Blueprint newspaper. And now the lead story, community policing. Traditional state authorities must work together, says President Buhari. With 3 riders to that, Sultan seeks protection for traditional institution. Country's unity in monarch's hands, says Oni. And policy critical in containing banditry, others in Northwest, says IGP. Details of that story is on page 6 of the Blueprint. Now, below the photo story, IPPIS, ASU, dares federal government, mobilizes members for strike. It's on page 8. And below that, UNICEF supporting Kaduna government to end child abuse by 2030. It's captured on page 7. Now, climate change. Federal government asks advanced nations to fulfill promise to Africa. It's on page 6. Now, Yuletide. Muslim woman donates Christmas tree to Kaduna Khan chairman. That's on page 7 as well. Now, minimum wage. Implementation. Labour warns state governments on default. It's on page 7 also of the Blueprint newspaper. Let's bring in Bayo now at this point.
Well, let's start on the good note of the wonderful gesture, a Muslim woman donating a Christmas tree to the chairman of Khan in Kaduna State. That is an example of peaceful coexistence and tolerance. Interestingly, other people of the same faith with the woman might think that what she did is uncalled for. And those are the extremists which are definitely causing problems in our society. Kaduna has had a challenge, particularly about ethnic and religion, and this gesture will go a long way in harmonizing the atmosphere of peaceful coexistence that is so much desired. There is that report Kingsley read about New Telegraph, which is reporting about blackout. That is predicated on the midnight ultimatum given by the electricity workers that they will shut down electricity. However, due to the intervention of the House of Representatives, the Speaker has invited the union and all those that are concerned, including the electricity generating agencies, including even the pension agency, because issues that were raised included that of pension. They are supposed to meet at 2 p.m. today, and there were reports in some media this morning that strike and the blackout has been suspended pending meeting with the members of the House of Representatives.
The blackout is on. It's not been suspended.
Well, I didn't have power in my home. I had thought that maybe the blackout was on, but there were reports in the media early this morning that strike by the electricity workers had been suspended.
Well, it is one thing for the union officials to say that they are suspending the industrial action, and then for their members to actually return to their duty posts and then begin to switch on the various transmission and distribution installations which they have switched off. The blackout started yesterday afternoon, and I mean, of course, everybody who has a generator has been on generator.
Yes.
Yes. Carry on.
Yes, energy is a source of all human activities presently, and it's not a good story to tell. That a nation such as Nigeria has a blackout. Based on one controversy or the other, whatever that it may be. By now, many Nigerians would have thought that something ought to have been done before the shutdown in the first place. Dr. Kingsley pointed out, who is now sure that the staff of different agencies or organizations involved have returned to the duty posts to switch on what they switched off.
Particularly that, prior to now, until yesterday, there was a 21-day ultimatum that was given. What was done to speak to negotiate, to stop this persistent danger of throwing the whole nation into possible darkness, if at all that strike has not been suspended as it is alleged. But the sad situation is that most often than not, for Nigerian citizens, generator now serves as the main power supply. And sometimes the power that comes from the public electricity generating company now becomes the standby for people to get electricity, and it's very sad.
Well, I mean, we had a report earlier from the floor of the National Assembly, in particular the House of Reps. They are summoning the ministers of power and labor to find out what they have done. But let's face it, merely issuing a 21-day notice for an industrial action doesn't suffice. There are procedures. Did they declare a trade dispute? And if the notice was to the Minister of Power, the question that would then arise, did the Minister of Power then contact the Minister, his counterpart in labor? And if a trade dispute was declared and the Minister of Labour was put on notice, what steps did that ministry then take to ensure that there was conciliation and so on and so forth? But I don't think it's sufficient that you issue a 21-day notice and then the next thing is you embark on. Don't forget, electricity workers are under essential services.
They have leaders. The unions have leaders, and those leaders understand what the law is, when it comes to the issue of calling for strike. They must have satisfied, certain regulatory actions, with respect to notifying the relevant authorities of their intention to go on strike. And 21 days ultimatum is also part of what the law says you should do, and perhaps it's, of course, the last aspect of it, which has now dovetailed into the strike action that they have taken. So what we're saying is that every Nigerian should be saying, actually, is to ensure that when it comes to power, we take it very seriously because it's going to affect so many businesses. It's going to affect, as a matter of fact, it's going to touch on all aspects of our existence.
All
will be touched. So it's a very serious matter.
But you know, I mean, this is not our topic for conversation. So, some of the grievances that they have outlined, this relates to the legacy issues in the privatization of the power sector, because they are talking about the payment of outstanding pension or benefits of their members who were on the staff of PHCN. So whose responsibility is that? That's the question to ask. And then, of course, you will also ask the question, what is now the nexus, between those former entities, the PHCN companies, and then, yes, and then the inheritor
and what did
companies.
the government do after the unbundling of PHCN? What did government do? Perhaps not this administration. It didn't happen during this administration. It happened long before 2015, right? So what was the deal, so to speak? What happened when it was unbundled? There has to be some agreements, reached before now, and because it was not addressed, that's why it has lingered up to this moment.
The good thing is that the House of Rep is intervening, and whether we like it or not, is assets and liabilities. Whether it was done by one administration or not, government is government, and as far as they're concerned, they have to accept the responsibility. And some of their grievances, like Kingsley mentioned, even touches on issues of pension. Some of them are saying that they have been on half pay for a long time, and several other things that they have been denied. My concern is that if notice about this has been given 21 days ago, where were people measures not taken to address this? Because power, you shut down power, you are shutting down the lifeblood of the nation. Anyway, the other interesting story too is Governor Ahmed Rufai of Kaduna State has been hailed as particularly about his cabinet. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo said that after a private visit to Kaduna, said that Kaduna is now a kind of a mixing pot of ethnic groups. He hailed the initiative of the Kaduna State Governor for having other people from other parts of the country in his cabinet, and therefore making Kaduna some kind of mini Nigeria. And he also reminiscent that he also can be described as a son of the soil because he lived in Kaduna between 1959 and 1967. And he also said he served in the Mogadishu Battalion, which also, interestingly, had soldiers from all over the country and was also a mini Nigerian. Governor El-Rufai was very grateful, and he said he earned some of the experiences he had while serving under the auspices or the administration of former President Olusegun Obasanjo.
Okay, Kieran, let me take leadership newspaper very quickly. Below the nameplate of leadership newspaper, Nigeria loses 600 billion naira monthly to Apapa Tinkan Pulse gridlock. And then the list story says constituency projects to get 20% of national budget. Bill scales second reading. Details can be found on page 4. This is a bill not for the 2020 appropriation bill that has already been passed. This is a bill to ensure that going forward, constituency projects constitute 20% of the national budget. So the bill scales second reading. Addressing President Muhammadu Buhari as general, no big deal. That's according to the presidency. It says it's testimony to press freedom. And then below the photograph on the front page of the leadership newspaper showing President Muhammadu Buhari along with other African heads of state at the summit in Egypt, you have the following headlines. World's first all-electric commercial plane takes flight. Details on page 49. Well, a commercial plane is a 6-seater aircraft, and the distance it could travel was 160 kilometers. That's about 100 miles. Not a commercial plane.
Nautical miles?
Well, that's what they said, yes. No, not nautical miles. I believe it's ground coverage. Okay. But nautical miles, of course, that means it's quite extensive. It's on lithium battery. We've already talked about electricity workers. Federal government okays 40 billion for Kano and Bauchi roads. Akpabio withdraws from senatorial rerun. That's page 10. 16-year-old Swedish girl named Time Person of the Year. That's page 49 as well. And Nigerian Air Force launches Operation Rattlesnake in Northeast.
Well, the presidential spokesman, Femi Adesina, says that the choice by the Punch to address the president henceforth as retired Major General is in itself an indication of freedom of expression and freedom of the press, which the Punch is enjoying. However, Garba Shehu, the special advisor on publicity, says that it is not within the ambit of the Punch to whimsically change the official title of the country's president. Garba argues that Punch did not challenge President Obasanjo when he withheld Lagos State local government funds in spite of Supreme Court ruling by calling him a general. Neither did they resort to refuse to call General Ibrahim Babangida president when he was not actually elected. Well, the danger here is that an editorial is an opinion of a newspaper. And in journalism, facts are sacred, comments are free. The paper is free to express an opinion. But when you choose that henceforth you are going to refer to the president as Major General Muhammadu Buhari, that goes beyond an opinion because it will be talking about a house style. For instance, there's a newspaper in this country that shows that whoever you are, they will address you as a mister. And that was a house style, and the house style becomes the format of a newspaper. And that is accepted. But in a newspaper expressing an editorial, an opinion, which it is entitled to, and that opinion is tending to put the paper as if it is dabbling into the political arena. Elections have been over. What we expect to see is governance. But what we still have is an element of campaign, which I fear the Punch is now throwing political punches. If it gets into the political ring, it will be hit by a political punch, and that is very dangerous. The danger for us as Nigerians is that if you look at our newspapers these days, you need to look at one or two before you get a clear picture of the true position of what is happening. The role of the newspaper is supposed to be the surveillance of the environment, correlating over the past, and also transmitting the daily history. But when newspapers begin to take patent sides, not on an editorial, but even in the day-to-day reportorial, there is a danger. Even in the electronic media, you need to listen to one medium and the other before you get a true balance of what is going on in the nation. There is a danger for our media if they dabble into politics.
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering why they should take to that. They want to address him as Major General when he's already a president. That's a transition. It's about title. It's about name. Yes, he was a Major General. Yes, but after that, he has already moved on. And there was a political process, which he was part of. As a matter of fact, for over 12 years now, and he has emerged as an elected president. Now, why return to the other title, which has dropped, perhaps based on his current status as the president of the country? For me, it is wrong.
There is a danger with our media. In 1979 study we did, we're trying to look at how media react to issues. Looked at three issues: Sharia issues, freedom of expression, and revenue allocation. And the tendency was that newspapers and media would tend to pander to the whims of their ownership and their geographical location, depending upon the issue. But when it came to the issue of press freedom, which concerned all of them, they were all united. But when it came to Sharia, you could see the regional and the geopolitical interests showing up.
All right, Bayo and Kirian, there are just a few points to make, just to clarify this before we get to the editorial, because we are already overrunning in terms of the newspaper review. Now, the concern here is with the prefix.
Yes.
Not the title of the president. Contrary to what presidential spokesman Malanga Bashir said, the title of the president is Muhammadu Buhari, President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic, if you like, of Nigeria. President, President, Commander-in-Chief of that. That's his title. Now, there is also a suffix that one comes after his title. That is GCFR, standing for Grand Commander of the Federal Republic. The prefix is what Punch now says, okay, we're going to revert to his military rank. The U.S. had a president who was also a general. He served in World War II, Eisenhower. Yeah. He was president of the U.S. from 1953 until 1961. He participated in World War II. Okay, you find references to him sometimes as General Eisenhower, also as President Eisenhower. But President Muhammadu Buhari, it doesn't hurt. Are you with me? So it's the prefix that is the issue. And if they have indicated their reason and it becomes their house style, well, I mean, you talked about Simply Minister earlier, excuse me, which was the house style of the Guardian, before it was abandoned in 1985. So it's not really the title, but it's just the prefix that they're talking about and the connotation that implies, and the circumstances under which they have decided to use this.
It is important for us to get things right in respective of what people you're leaning. Now let's go to the editorial, and the editorial is very important. It is on malaria. Is Nigeria ready to win malaria war? Let me just take a paragraph here. The high rate of death on malaria-related diseases, as the new report by the WHO Strategic Advisory Group on Malaria Eradication shows, is very disturbing. The unacceptable report has called for an increased political commitment to ensuring an end to malaria in the world and in Nigeria specifically. Bayo.
Well, the editorial is worried that among the 5 nations that are said to be top endemic with malaria, Nigeria is one of them. In fact, the percentage for Nigeria is put, where's the percentage for Nigeria? Nigeria is said to have about 25% of prevalence, and it is the highest, particularly on the continent of Africa. It's followed next by Democratic Republic of Congo, which are 11. Mozambique, India, and Uganda, all of them are having about 5 and 4%. But the concern of the editorial is that officers who are charged with the program for malaria, particularly when we have found out that in our climate, the victims of malaria are mostly children and expected mothers, are not living up to the expectation. And the editorial is saying that government must put strict measures to ensure that the measures that are there to check malaria are abided by, and the funds that are donated towards it are actually applied for it. The World Health Organization is expressing massive concern that the malaria, rather than getting reduced, is also on ascendancy. The good news of recent was that a vaccine has been found that could help in the future prevent malaria. That, if it goes to clinical trials and it is approved, then it's a very positive development. But meanwhile, the basic measures to eliminate malaria must be put in place, and the measures by government must be supported. And those, the editorial I say, those who are sabotaging it must be held to account.
All right, Bayo, at this point, we'd like to thank you for this morning's analysis. It's been quite loaded. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
We'll see you again tomorrow. All right, we thank you for staying with us up to this moment on the program. And of course, our focus, as we earlier informed you, is on the cost of election litigation. And to set the tone for the conversation this morning, let's take a look at this background report put together by Abdulmalik Adio.
The Nigerian judiciary has often come under severe criticism for its handling of election petition cases. In some instances, judges have been accused of deliberate lateness, leading to unnecessary delays, conspiracy to frustrate litigants, corruption including allegedly selling judgment to the highest bidder, as well as undue politicization of cases. Experts say litigation in Nigeria is essentially adversarial and sometimes requires huge funds for effective utilization by disputing parties. The cost of legal representation, filing processes, compiling exhibit, and mobilizing witnesses to court have substantially increased over time, particularly in view of the recent economic recession in Nigeria, thereby making it increasingly difficult for aggrieved parties to afford the cost of litigation. Legal experts insist that the most effective and enduring panacea to all problems associated with election petitions is in organizing and conducting elections that are free, fair, transparent, credible, and acceptable to all, requiring no intervention of the court to decide their outcome. Guests on Good Morning Nigeria will attempt to identify, dissect, and interrogate the salient issues and challenges associated with election petition adjudication.
All right, thank you very much, Abdulmalik Adio, for that backgrounder. We have all our 4 guests here with us in the studios to discuss this subject matter. Incidentally, all our 4 guests, they are lawyers, but we're going to reduce the subject to such a level that our viewers will understand what we're talking about. I recall that, Kieran, a few days ago when we were discussing aspects relating to pension for former governors and deputy governors, one of the tweets we got said that, look, there was too much cross-reference and reference to sections in the Constitution and law that she was having a headache already. So, so this morning we'll ensure that there's no headache. But incidentally, one of our guests who was with us is also back in the studios to join us this morning. Yunus Ustaz Usman, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Pleasure to have you again on Good Morning.
Good morning.
All right. Also here with us in the studios, Honorable Shaban Ibrahim is a member of the Lokoja Kogi Federal Constituency, the Federal House of Representatives. Pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
He's also
Good
a lawyer.
morning.
Yes, and we have the Director, Publicity and Voter Education at the Independent National Electoral Commission, Oluole Osaze Uzi. We're glad to have you this morning.
Pleasure, thank you.
And Professor of Law, that's Professor Yemi Akinshe George, who is a Senior Advocate of Nigeria, is also here with us this morning for this conversation. So you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Principally, I'm the odd man out. Everybody here is a lawyer. But I'm going to be the layman representing the rest of Nigerians who did not pass through any kind of legal training. So let's get started, Kinsley.
Are we going to have to walk you out or something? All right, Kiriat, thanks a lot. Well, let's begin first by having an appreciation of the numbers, because when we're talking about the cost of litigation, obviously the reference will be had, Kirian, to what we are dealing with. I mean, election cycles, we see sometimes there is a spike in election cases. In some other election cycles, there is a decline. So can we get a benefit from Osaze Uzi with regard to what we have seen? I don't know what the numbers are exactly. Say from 2011 to 2015 to 2019, do we see a rise and fall in election litigation matters before the tribunal? And if so, what is the coloration?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. Yes, there have in recent years been a rise in the number of litigations that we have. That is a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing in the sense that the legal framework has provided for a way of addressing real or perceived grievances. And that is, in cases of elections, that is by way of petitions to the relevant courts. But in talking about petitions, you talk of litigations generally. So we have the pre-election cases, which don't go before the tribunals, but go to the regular courts. Then you have the election cases. So you have to combine both. There has been an increase. Various factors are responsible for this. We've not carried out a study to really ascertain, but we know that now today there are 92 political parties, and each one is entitled to sponsor candidates for elections. And if the party or the candidate is aggrieved, then he has a chance to seek litigation as a way to address those grievances. The courts are there for that. That's the way the legal framework constitution has spelled it out. I'm sure the professor and my seniors will know, senior advocates will know, speak more on that. But basically, because of the number of political parties, the increased knowledge and understanding of how you can use the law to resolve disputes. That is the only known mechanism. Arbitration and non-litigation options are there, but in terms of petitions, for example, that is the statutory way to go. People are not always satisfied with alternative means. And also, so you have aspirants as well. Those are people who did not become candidates, people who are aggrieved because of intra-party disputes, because of issues regarding their within their political parties. So whereas in petitions we deal with inter-party, in terms of other litigations, there are intra-party disputes arising from the delegates that seek, that elect candidates in the parties, qualification of those candidates within the parties. Maybe they haven't been in the party for long enough, or the powers that be acted contrary to the guidelines of the political parties. So there are many things involved. But the number of political parties, the increased number of political parties, the increased awareness has led to this, and the increased contestation for power amongst aspirants, amongst party members, have also, I think, led to this exponential growth in terms of the number of litigations that we see.
All right, let's go to Yunus Ustaz Usman, who is also a senior advocate of Nigeria. Legal frameworks have been provided, for election litigations, and from what Osaze Uzi informed us this morning, there is an upsurge in the number of litigations that have occurred in the recent past, or rather, of course, in the past 10 years or thereabout. Now, what does that portend for the nation's democracy. First, we used to address ourselves as, nascent democracy. But now, many Nigerians will think that we have matured. And we now have the kind of upsurge in litigations after or before elections in the country. What does it portend for the entire development of our democracy?
It's a very good development for democracy. Let me tell you the reason. It is better to go via litigation than to take cutlass. It's not better. It means that people are now aware that it is better for them to have their rights determined in a court of law rather than taking the law into their hands. And that is good for us. That means we are advancing politically. We are getting more civilized and more tolerant. It's good. Forget about the cost. The cost of election petitions can never be matched with the cost of violence. Can it? It's a very good omen. And I hope we'll continue like that.
Professor George, what's your own perspective? I mean, Osaze has given us what, in his opinion, are the causative factors for the rise in the quantum of election cases, or litigation in general, pre and post-election. Is this an omen, or is it a heavy development?
While it is, just as the respected senior Silk has said, it is good that people should take their matters to courts rather than having recourse to violence. That's very good. However, increasing litigation from our elections is not evidence of progress, particularly because what drives those aspirations? What drives the cases? Why are people so desperate to rig elections, to abuse the process, and then look for huge sums of money to make sure that the judicial process responds to, or delivers to them the political office? Why? You see, we need to look at this craze for political office. There's too much money in our politics, and that's what is killing the country. Before elections, you find that there's so much money in circulation. The moment election is over, government is hardly even finding it difficult to fund their budget. I understand security votes, funds that should have been used for development, all of these are channeled to bribe voters, pay for litigation, and all sort of things. So the huge amount of money involved in our politics is the root cause of corruption. Because if a man has spent so much money to buy an election office, an electoral office, either through the election or through the courts, and he gets into office, the first thing is he wants to recoup his investment. So that's what we call political corruption. And that's the root of corruption. Political corruption is the mother of corruption. And that is because of the huge amount of money that politicians must use to get political office. So it does not portend something good for our democracy. We need to deal with the root cause of our problem. You are prosecuting. How many people are you going to prosecute? You only prosecute a few, but the majority go without prosecution. So the evil we are fighting against continues because of the influence of money, big money in politics. We must be able to address that. If we don't address that, this democracy is not going anywhere.
All right, so you just brought in a nexus between election litigation and, of course, corruption, which is a part of our topic this morning, the relationship between election litigation, and of course corruption, and the volume of the funds, that are injected, in litigations, as he pointed out. Now, let's come to you, Shaban Ibrahim. You just Shaba Ibrahim. You've just emerged, from a litigation process, that has returned to the House of Representatives, which means that you have experienced, that process. And as a practicing politician, does it all go well, for us to have a litany of litigations in Nigeria?
Thank you so much. If I'm going to talk from personal experience, it will be a departure from the norms that the larger society are
aware of or seem to be aware of. Like we say my case is different. I've seen so many things, positive, negative, and in some instances, stories that I have to tell will be a departure from what you are used to hearing. Talk of election litigation. Every Nigerian knows what it costs if you want to ask my brother over to the court, my very, very over brother, and people in this. We have a professor of law here. All of us know what the cost is. In the course of my litigation, because I've experienced it on all fronts, I had the full compliments of a minimum of 5 senior advocates of Nigeria. I also had, as small as I am, a reserve list of those who said, look, if things get out of hand, please call on us. It will interest you to know that personally I didn't have to pay a penny. If you take it further, sir, go to the INEC level that seems to have a reputation or notoriety for electoral infractions and what have you in the eyes of the people. I contested election, and I want to say, sir, I never approached INEC or any of its officials. I contested election. People have said the judiciary is corrupt. Our judges, especially those on election matters, seems to be sitting on gold mine. That's the general impression. But I went through litigation from the tribunal to the court of appeal level. I want to say to you, sirs, I never had to pay a penny or attempt to approach any of their lordships. That is why I said, sir, if I have to relate from my own experience, my case is different. That is not to say that part of the cause, the reason why you have these litigations coming and also the cost of litigation, taking it from the last, is that election petitions are special proceedings, and the kind of stress it puts on the advocates is such that, one, let me give you an instance. They are time bound. When you have a serious case to do, election matter to do, even the courts have come to recognize that they take precedence over other matters. So it's a full-time concentration because you need to deliver within a particular time frame. Then the pressure and the technicalities, imagine the onus on a legal practitioner or a petitioner before the tribunal to establish his case is so heavy, so deliberately made cumbersome, that any advocate, and I must say, it's not an all-comers game. Not all lawyers are into election petitions. So it's a specialized thing. If the onus that is placed on them, the burden that is placed on them is so onerous that it's a full-time thing, and it takes, I beg to say, because I've also been involved with them, it takes a whole lot of time. So it has to be expensive. And because of the nature, there are no deliberate technicalities that are not helping the system have been thrown in left, right, and center. I stand to be corrected, sir. Because the cost, before you go through it, if you are challenging, for instance, election of a governor, they expect that in every area you talk about an infraction, you must produce a witness, not produce evidence. There's a difference between calling a witness and delivering evidence. You have to do that. It's so onerous. So if you're a lawyer and you're going to take upon that kind of matter, you cannot be prepared to, charge a lot. Otherwise, and it's not one thing you see. You engage 2, 3, 4 senior advocates with a litany of younger lawyers behind them. It's not a tea party talking about finances, sir.
Okay, Honorable Shaba Ibrahim, thanks a lot for your opening salvo. We'll return to you. There are a number of points that you tell us from the field with regard to what you experienced. But there's another perspective to election litigation, and that's coming to the electoral umpire. In this case particularly, post-election matters, sometimes you see INEC also being made a respondent in pre-election matters to see whether indeed you witnessed the primaries and so on and so forth. But In post-election cases, INEC is almost always one of many respondents. How does this affect the operations of the electoral umpire in terms of time, in terms of personnel, in terms also even of financial costs, because you have to hire advocates, including the latest senior advocate here who is always for INEC.
Not always. This last circle has been for us. Whoever approaches him.
That's right.
Yeah, good question you just asked. First of all, in post-election, all post-election litigations, INEC must be a respondent. That is statutory. The Electoral Act says that anybody who is contesting an election in the tribunal must name the person declared winner and must name INEC. Without those two, the election petition is incompetent. So automatically, and in all pre-election cases, even though there's no statute saying INEC must be a respondent, INEC is invariably always a respondent. They say join INEC because they want INEC to be bound by whatever order is made by the court, and the courts can only bind somebody who is a party before it or is previous. So in all election-related litigations, even whether a person is qualified or not qualified, INEC is, whether INEC has a say, a right, or did anything wrong or not, INEC is always a respondent. Now that puts a very heavy burden on the commission. We have a relatively small, it's expanding, relatively small, but very vibrant legal department that has produced several senior advocates of Nigeria. We're very proud of what they do. But they are stretched. They're indeed stretched. There are some states that have over 100 litigations and we only have 1 or 2 lawyers. And we have to bring people from outside, from Abuja, from outside of the state, just to cope. When, as everybody here said, election petitions are time-bound. And it's such that sometimes you have days to file processes, to gather evidence, to interview your witnesses, to get their statements. In all these cases, you have written statements on oath. So not only do you have to gather hundreds, the honorable member mentioned, Honorable Shaba mentioned a governorship petition. In a presidential election, the onus covers so many states. And you have to bring evidence. And sometimes people say, INEC is not cooperating. People ask for a register. While you're asking for that register was used for several elections. So somebody in Enugu might be asking for a register. In Sokoto, they're asking for that same register. The presidential panel is asking for the same register in Abuja. But you must look at this register, certify each page, and go into thousands of pages. You must personally, and the Supreme Court has said that we found a clever way of dealing with it and say we'll just make a rubber stamp and somebody stamps, I've certified the thing, it's mine. But the Supreme Court said, no, that's not correct. You must personally sign every page of that document. And I'm talking of literally hundreds of thousands. Naturally, mistakes will be made. Some people pull fast ones. And then you must compare that copy you've made with the original. And even if people were employed to do that, they cannot just cope. So sometimes we decentralize. And once you decentralize things, problems occur. And somebody is certifying a register, another one wants to assist him, but the same register, because there might be 2 petitions from, let's say, a House of Rep case, a senatorial case, a presidential case, maybe a governorship case. So these are some of the challenges. Then a new trend has been that you move tribunals to Abuja. Or cases occur in River State, but somebody goes to file in Sokoto State and says the Federal High Court is one jurisdiction, which is correct. But forum convenience, which is the convenient forum. But now I have to move people from Port Harcourt or HA or anywhere else to Sokoto or Kebbi or anywhere else, or vice versa. So these are the real logistical challenges. I have to move materials, tons of materials, because they say they want to tender these things. Even if I've certified those things, they might ask for the originals. I'll now have to move these things there. And each of these cases, I must hire lawyers, because the in-house counsel fortunately can go to court and do go to court, but they cannot cope with the sheer volume. Another dimension which we'll probably talk about later is how this impresses on the conduct and management of the elections. You've just come out of Kogi and Bayelsa. Orders were flying around 24 hours to the election. How do you manage? Who's on the ballot, who's not on the ballot? These are some serious challenges that impede on the cost. We print our ballot papers to currency standard. In fact, higher than currency standard. We have the same security features as currency. We have codes and secrets embedded in security things embedded in those things. We escort those things in the same way as currency is escorted, with armed escort at all times. And keep them the same way currency is kept in the vaults of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Safe. And each time we open the currency, you just move the things to the banks. But each time we have to open these materials, we call observers, we call accredited observers, call the accredited media, come and call party agents, come and see us move these things. And they open the things, they must satisfy themselves. We have to customize them. We have to do color coding or other customization features. Because what we use in this particular local government, we might not be able to use it. Currencies, you use currency all over the country and dollars all over the world. But ours, you cannot use balloting instruments for this local government or even ward or regional area for another one because of fear that it might be compromised. So these are some of the things that increase all the costs of litigations and elections.
Thank you. Very, very pertinent points that you have raised there. And we will now go to Ustaz Usman, who first in his opening remarks told us that election litigation is a healthy development for our democracy. But now, going by what Shaba Ibrahim told us, you are lucky because you were a lawyer. You say you didn't pay a dime, through the process that you went through. Well, exactly.
It does not require you to think that.
No. Why we say that is that a non-lawyer may not be able to, galvanize, the sounds, 5 of them that will take his case on. That is natural. We know that, So that's why you have actually said that your case is different. That's true. I want to agree with that. Okay, now, Ustaz Usman, according to Shaba, the process is deliberately made cumbersome. A situation that puts the lawyers and judges involved, places a kind of a huge burden on lawyers and judges concerned, when we talk about the election litigations. Now, something is wrong here, structurally. So what is wrong? Because we're talking about law. We're talking about the practice of law. We're talking about legal practitioners who are the operators of the law. We're talking about litigation. We're talking about the cost of litigation. So what is wrong somewhere? Why should it be so cumbersome? As Uzi told us, he has to move materials from maybe Port Harcourt to Sokoto, because a high court in Sokoto is also a high court in a. Is there no jurisdiction? Is there no, okay, fine, this is your environment. Use the federal high court in that environment. Why would you now move it to another high court? Because you want to ensure that 1 or 2 things are compromised. So what is really wrong? And how can it be addressed?
I totally agree with my brother that election petitions are too technical. I started with the election petition in 1983, but up till now, each time election petitions are brought to me, I have to start reading again. It's a very terrible thing. And I will have to start reading like primary school again. And sometimes, believe in me, sometimes you don't have time to bath. And it's unnecessarily cumbersome. And I think especially our people in the legislative houses have to make these things easier, so that whoever has a complaint doesn't need to go through all this strict legal adherence before they can get justice. It's too technical. I have always delivered papers in Ghana, and I told them, look, once somebody says, I don't agree with the election issue, you may give him a month, but don't throw it out on technical ground. Hear him and determine it. But unfortunately, we don't have that in this country at all. It's so technical, it's time bound, where you ought to sign or the other party does not sign and so on, it's thrown out. It is too technical that we need to do something quickly about it. And one of the easiest ways is to go by the Ways Commission report. That ought to have eased out too many things. But unfortunately, I think that has been thrown overboard now, unfortunately. I think intentionally, with the greatest respect, by the members of the legislative houses who think that for those who forge their way in, it won't favor them to go there. And I'm telling you, I believe, I'm saying so, that most of the winners forge their way in. And so those people would like to cling to this crasser technicality. That is the issue. Things will have to be made easy. I delivered a paper at the public hearing during David Mark something. When I left, somebody called me. He said, you want to make the drivers. But no, you see, election petitions should be so made in such a way that somebody who is not a lawyer will be able to prosecute himself. But it is unfortunate in this country. And let me tell you, what happens is that the corruptive aspects are done mainly before the elections are conducted. Mainly. But when you can't prove again, they will say the judge is bribed, the judge is this. Look, my brother, I started this in 1983. When the case is clear, there is nothing the judge can do. His name is at stake. And they are being monitored by SSS people. I don't have a brother and sister on the bench. But that's my little experience as an old man.
Thank you very much, Yunus Usman, SA. Let's bring in our other senior advocate, Professor George. Professor George, I mean, this is one straightforward way to ask this question is election litigation delivering justice in our democracy? In answering that question, I would like you to have regard to the points already raised by the other panelists, including Sazel Ozi, who talked about the abuse of forum convenience, which is a cardinal principle ordinarily in conflict of laws. Why would you be looking for a forum that is not convenient for the litigants? And then, why are we so mechanistic about the election litigation, even though it's generally described as being sui generis? Are we getting justice out of it? And then, thirdly, part of what you take along with this is this fueling the behavior we now find from the political class, who could instigate all kinds of shenanigans and then say, after the election, go to court.
In fact, this attitude has brought about what I call terrible impunity. You ask the question, the electoral litigation process does not bring about justice. It does not bring about justice for the public because resources that should be used for development are channeled towards elections. And it starts from even primary elections. Our political parties cannot conduct primary elections successfully because of money moving hands. People bribing chairmen of parties. Even those who are not supposed to participate in the election, because they are able to pay, they are produced as candidates. Those who have nothing to offer the public are produced as candidates because they have money to pay. So, again, the electoral law is very bad. The electoral law is very bad. We've been tinkering with the Electoral Act since 2002. Making minor changes. Now everybody is saying we want to reform the electoral law. This electoral law cannot be reformed. It's completely bad. We need to go back to the drawing boards, throw it overboard, and prepare completely brand new electoral law that will benefit from the reports of observers, international observers, local observers, from the experience of INEC. If we continue this way, a time is going to come when there will be no money to drive the economy of the country because we have spent all the money on the elections. So, the electoral system as configured at the moment does not deliver justice to anyone. It delivers justice only to those who can afford to rig the process, beginning from the primaries. My friend, you are lucky you didn't pay your lawyers, but there's a time you are going to pay. Oh yeah, there's no free lunch. You may not have paid cash, but there are other forms, there are other ways by which you're going to pay. Don't be surprised if you begin to receive, I have this project I'm pursuing, can you fund it? Or I have this candidate, can you find him a job? Use your influence and all of that. So there's something to pay. So the electoral system does not deliver justice to the country, does not deliver justice to the electorates who are given 500 or 1,000 naira during the election, and after the election, the politician goes back. The funds are taken outside of the country. We find out some of our politicians have properties all over the world, in world capitals, funds that should have been channeled to development of the economy. And they justify that I bought it. Someone told me, a client told me, I spent 250 million. And it's not for the Senate, it's not even for governorship. It's just one of a seat in the House of Representatives. Now, the guy now gets to the National Assembly. You are telling him, you can't touch the funds. You have to. No. His first priority is to recoup his election expenses by any means. And you are telling him about anti-corruption. So I think I think I'm grateful that you have set up this platform, NTA, to discuss this issue. The root cause of corruption in Nigeria is the amount of money we spend on our elections. And all the parties are guilty of that. All the parties are guilty of that. So even INEC itself is incapacitated. Because the funds that are available to the politicians, the funds that are available to manipulate the system. Anyway, let's
Kira, I'm sorry, Prof. I mean, I asked a triple-barrel question.
Yes.
You've taken one aspect of it. I'm sure, gentlemen, you're also familiar with this. And INEC, of course, is always at the receiving end of it. We have seen what appears to be very worrisome, to some observers of the legal process. Look, a matter is in Rivers or it's in Akwa Ibom. The tribunal starts sitting, maybe they hear 1 or 2 gunshots, so everybody come to Abuja. Or, the litigants are in Owerri, and then the man goes to file an action in Maiduguri, and everybody has to go there, to go and answer to the issue. I mean, I've heard some cases from Kogi, which is near Abuja here, and the tribunal is sitting, or the Federal High Court is sitting in Abuja. What does that mean?
The system is failing. A time is going to come when all election petitions will have to be conducted in Abuja. We are getting near that. Initially, it was Rivers and one other state. Now, many states are coming to Abuja. Any election petition, you bring it to Abuja. Because you have all the armed forces here, you have more security here. So it doesn't show that we're making real progress. It doesn't show that we're making real progress. And somebody said, you can be having elections. Having elections does not mean you have a democracy. Is your democracy delivering justice? Is the democracy delivering development? More people are getting poorer. The poverty line, the poverty line is entangling more and more people. Even the so-called rich people, they cannot enjoy electricity for one reason or the other. Infrastructure, we have no roads. Security is threatened. So are we really making progress? And if we don't address the root cause is our elections. Why do people have to kill to spend so much money to gain political office? Because all you need to get to be rich in Nigeria, get political office. You start appropriating all kinds of things for in your direction.
Gentlemen, this conversation has gone to a point where we should begin, to be specific in terms of who does what, who should be blamed for what. Now, the question Kingsley asked, that concerns environmental or convenience or judicial convenience, whatever you may like to call it, foreign convenience, is apt. Now, who decides who should go where?
The law is bad.
We have the Nigerian
You
Bar
can't blame the
Association,
judiciary.
We have the bench and bar.
Yes.
The entire judicial community. Can they address it? Are they
It's the political class. The judiciary cannot address it.
I just want to understand what should be
the political class.
What should be your role in all of this? Because one, if you are speaking up, the political class may have to listen, because without judiciary, the political class cannot function effectively and efficiently. So, what should be your role in this? Then we have discovered a lacuna, if you like, in your language, that exists in the litigation process, especially election litigation process. What can be done? What should your professional bodies do to correct the anomaly?
You see, let's clear one ambiguity here as to my status. I don't even know the one you put me now. when you talk of political class, you take me there, you say, whether practitioner, you put me there. And because I've been on all sides, it's difficult to even situate my own status. Needless to say, if we are going to address it from the point of view of the political class, I'll be looking at it slightly differently from what the legal titans will say. So you have to be very specific so that I can know which one to handle.
I'm sorry, may I just clarify this issue? Now, this issue of saying when you have this dispute in Rivers, you take to Sokoto and the rest, I've always said so. It's a very easy way of doing so. You see, when it comes to the presidential election, you don't have this. So why don't we do this simply? Now, conduct all the elections with the presidential elections the same day. These things, it will be with minimal occurrence and costs. The moment you don't do so, you stagger it. After the presidential one, this man say, okay, my own is coming now, I will do it. This one will say, that is it is the cause. And that is what India did. And India is satisfied today. And I can do so. conduct of presidential, particularly combine presidential with gubernatorial, because the most rigged ones are gubernatorial, which I've done many times. The most rigged ones.
So you rigged them? Or
no, it is the petition. It's the, and when they rig, I tell them they rig. But the moment you can combine presidential with gubernatorial, particularly gubernatorial, because those are those who must rig. Yes.
Okay.
Now, combine. Do them on the same day.
Shawa Ibrahim, come from the perspective of you being belonging to a political class. Yes. Because we have all agreed that political class drives the system.
Yes. Is the analogy of which one came first, the chick or the egg? I do not agree entirely that the political class is the bane of the problem. I rather like to take it from the point of view of the larger society that has propped up a corrupt political class that is now suffering the consequence of his indiscretion. I don't know, let us look at it bottom up. The society generally, in all facets, is corrupt. You cannot expect to walk in the rain and not get wet. What that society produces are not saints. It will prop up the kind of institution. When you have crooks, for instance, manning institutions, when you have a rumor of ex-convicts and whatever, you finding their ways into maybe the police force or security agencies, you get compromised. So it is that system that has propped up this political class. What you are seeing is a backlash of that indiscretion of the system in propping up an inept and morally reckless class, if you like. So I would rather see the political class as a consequence of the larger society. And it's a reflection of what the larger society is.
There can be a consequence. I agree with you, sir. There can also be a solution.
Yeah, I was just
there can also be a solution.
Before you
we need more people like you who will correctly appreciate the situation. For instance, the Leonard Stick has suggested that we need an electoral system that will ensure that all elections take place simultaneously. These are the things we need to start thinking. The electoral law as constituted cannot deliver justice. It cannot. The cases are so confused. I have published several books on electoral cases. We find contradictory decisions, and you do not blame the courts.
Right. The jurisprudence
is completely messed up.
It's a ticket, you know.
Completely messed up.
I mean, Sazan realizes that. But still on this issue, I mean, Honorable Shaba is talking about the fact that the political class emerged from the larger society. Some persons would argue, fine, yes, it's a creature of the larger society, but that creature has become a Frankenstein. How do you deal with it?
Yes, we're not far from each other. The Frankenstein monster will consume his creator. That's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, but how then do you deal with that Frankenstein in terms of the practicality?
You see, I'm going to talk practically now. You have a society where impunity has become the order of the day. All of us are imperiled, whether you like it or not. It may depend on what side of the divide you are today. It may be convenient for you today, but tomorrow may portend another different thing. So we all owe ourselves and the people a duty to be careful when issues like this have been addressed. What I think we can do, the problem, each time with due respect, the problem is not law or the absence of law. The problem is this culture of impunity. For instance, we were holding the PDP primaries in Kogi. Gunmen came. Gunmen, that was intra-party. Gunmen came and shot and killed. I lost somebody in the process. Till this moment,
no justice.
Nobody is even asking questions as to who did what. Then we went into the main election. I mean, the whole world saw it. So I'm saying that the kind of impunity that we have in the system is becoming intolerable. It's not because the law books are not there to take charge of this infraction, we are the cause. The average man will, from legislation, you coin it in such a way that you leave some window of opportunity for technical nonsense that will make a mess of the entire basis of law and order, which is to deliver justice.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Kingsley, I think he has made a very valid point here. The society, created the political class. Yes. But the political class is now in charge of institutions of law. Yes. Institutions that can be used to correct the society. That's what we're saying. In political science, we believe that, look, every society behaves in tandem with the character of the people in power, which is what I'm talking about, the political class. Yes. Right, so the political class, you have been privileged to now reverse the trend. That's what we're talking about. You have the key to changing the situation. So that's what we're talking about. And you can't just do away with that, because that is the only way to bring about a correction of what has gone wrong in decades. So that but I think we're supposed to be going on break right now.
Let's secure this in perspective. You see, I'm not saying that the political class is helpless or cannot provide solutions. I thought the question relates to what is the cause. If we graduate into what do you think is the solution, maybe I'll have to say what I think it is. Okay. Because the whole idea, you see, it depends on from what angle you are looking at it. I'm saying that one is a consequence rather than the cause of the other.
All right. When we return from this break, we're going to talk more on that, so you can give us a perspective as to how we can bring about solution to
it will be my pleasure to share.
This is Good Morning Nigeria, and we're glad you are still watching the show this morning. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we shall be, of course, concluding this edition of the program with more conversations. Don't go.
All right, you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We have a torrent of tweets that have come in from our viewers on this very interesting topic of the cost of election litigation. As you very well can glean from our four guests this morning, this is a Hydra-headed challenge, and many perspectives are being brought up still. Let's take these tweets now. Amangbola Hombad says, there's no doubt that the cost of pursuing election victory in our courts is rather humongous. When candidates spend hundreds of millions in pursuing election results, it tells how desperate people are to rule, not to serve the public. Over time, maybe until lately, electoral victories have been hung on how much politicians are ready to spend to buy victories. We have seen it happen over and over again.
All right, from Festus Akimbewa. Election challenges are a fundamental part of electoral process, and election litigation should not be as expensive as it is in our country. Our election petition process is long and windy and rarely delivers a swift determination of the validation of an election. It's time for reform. Now, to curb this menace, as he calls it, the judiciary has a greater role to play. This is because once the political class knows it cannot bribe its way through the judiciary, the cost of litigation will reduce. The level of break-in there will reduce. There will be less death and arson, among others.
Sunday Michael Omakoji. Now, if some of us are to write exactly about the cost of election litigation in this country, there will be litigation and counter-litigation for our comments.
Now, Corey Mustafa says, problems are the lawyers. Their problems are the lawyers, because while attending to a litigant that lacks sufficient evidence to challenge the winner, so receiving such a case is nothing but just because of the money-making season.
Abdul tweets, now if political parties and the electoral umpire adhere strictly to the rules, litigation will be minimal, hence saving cost.
Delegate Solomon, efforts must be made to reduce incidents of violence during elections in Nigeria. This can be achieved by infusing the electoral process with incentives that discourage the resort to violence, which may involve rethinking the electoral system to ensure that it is not a zero-sum game. The cost of the election and litigations are too high for the sustenance of democracy in Nigeria. Also, more monies are wasted on litigations before and after, which can be diverted to boost the economy. We must find ways of reducing costs without impinging on the integrity of elections.
Francis Obi, now the cost has been made so high to discourage every Dick and Harry who doesn't have enough evidence from embarking on litigation. Lawyers are not always present when elections take place and depend on the evidence before them to defend their aggrieved party or to pursue their case. Present a true picture to your lawyer and let him advise you before you go into full litigation.
All right, Chris Simeon, for election matters to be moved from election tribunal to appeal court, from appeal court to Supreme Court is a waste of funds. time, and delay in justice. Special courts should be established to deal with election matters within 60 days to avoid waste.
Pen Praise, that's the handle of this contributor. So the cost of election litigation will only reduce when the process of election becomes transparent and politics is seen as an opportunity to serve instead of personal financial enrichment.
Now, from Law Alpha C, litigation expenses are after elections are on the high side, and that is why politicians do almost everything humanly possible to win the election and avoid greedy lawyers. Post-election litigation expenses are always on the high side, thereby monetizing the process and discouraging patriotic and genuine political office seekers without large pockets.
Badamasi Adamu tweets, now election cost is very exorbitant due to our parochial political culture. And the remedy, I think, is for us to have a political culture and then a participant's political culture and establish a court solely to hear electoral litigation.
All right, Steve Bond, it is financially expensive and mentally draining. All these could be avoided if the elections are electronic. Even if there will be litigation, court's time wouldn't be wasted. Electronic voting would make the exercise of an election and not a selection.
Now, Ayola Tawhid Adene, if our electoral process in Nigeria is free of malpractices, we'll have little or no litigation. Transparency and credible election as well as party primaries which should be well conducted.
Inusa Adamu, electronic voting can reduce the litigation drastically. Judgment by judges should be straightforward, as quick as possible. Technicalities not to be entertained.
Mike Ayakwa says the cost of electioneering and litigation is very high in Nigeria. The worst is that many election petitions are frivolous and mere academic exercises. We wonder how many judges we have on the bench to be handling these matters. Some lawyers are just shortchanging their clients. The Supreme Court should revisit all verdicts by lower and appellate courts, and if there's infraction or false verdicts, then sanction the judges in promotion and entitlement or dismissal and 20 years jail term without an option of fine. That's an expression of the anger. The Supreme Court cannot cannot just be a triad. It will be the accuser, the prosecutor, and then the judge. But you know, gentlemen, amongst the many proposals that have emerged from our conversation is that says, look, we have to get to the root cause. The legal framework for our election and also for dealing with aggrieved persons, that petition is cumbersome, it's not delivering justice. That's one aspect of it. From the perspective of the electoral umpire, Mr. Z, what would be your take on this? Because we do know that, I mean, the electoral law was to be amended on the eve of the last election, but they said, oh, it was too close. And now we are getting, before you know it, once they say Happy New Year, people will start preparing for 2023. And then, you know, once again, you release your timetable, your calendar for the next election cycle. Everybody say, no, wait on the next time. And then we are back to the same high cost, which is what we are discussing here. What would INEC like to see, for instance, in the electoral reforms that would mitigate the high cost that we're currently experiencing?
Well, fortunately, there are two bills now. I'm aware of at least two bills before the National Assembly. One to establish the Electoral Offences Commission and another to amend the Electoral Act. I think, if I'm not mistaken, both sponsored and co-sponsored by the former chairman of INEC and the Senate, Abakari, and the current Deputy Senate President, Senator Ovioma Agege. But we have to agree that yes, there are some changes needed in the legal framework, but some of these things are also constitutional issues. For now, I've heard that there will be constitutional reform probably will commence next year. So, and in terms of litigation, I think a lot of the things has to do with the fundamentals, the basic constitutional matters. At the same time as when litigations were endless, we complained that it took so long. Now we're complaining that they're so short. And the Supreme Court has said they will not extend time to do anything and use the analogy of the Rock of Gibraltar that doesn't move, doesn't shift. So the same way, fastidious adherence to timelines stipulated in the Constitution must be taken very, very seriously. Well, we come from a different perspective. The cost in terms, not necessarily of Naira and Kobo, but in terms of management of the electoral process. you made reference to a couple of weeks ago where we're getting orders almost on a daily basis in commission, one saying this, one saying the opposite, and it impacts on the conduct and management of the electoral process and consequential costs. For example, in Kogi State, we had to reprint the ballot paper several times, because so many parties went to court. Some succeeded, and that's a contradiction I think one of the earlier panelists made reference to. There are so many contradictory judgments. He said, Prof. said he has published books on that. So many contradictory judgments. Even in this Kogi case, some said, look, yes, the provisions of the Constitution are not self-executory. So INEC, as a regulatory and administrative and management body, ought to say, look, from the face of it, you are not constitutionally qualified to stand for this office. So I cannot put you on the ballot. We have sworn to uphold the Constitution. We're a creation of that Constitution. If we do not do that, then by default, because nobody challenges it, a non-Nigerian, an unqualified person, a person under age, will occupy the highest office in the land. So we say it's not self-executive. Let's be clear about it. There are judgments that say, yes, INEC, you are right. There are other judgments that say, no, you must go to court. Fortunately, I think the appellate courts will have the ability to consider these things. But even when some of these things have been settled, you still get contradictory, even from some of the superior courts. Or the principle of stare decisis is that you must follow precedent. A lot of the time, for example, Labour Party and INEC says that, look, when it's a rerun election, you only use those who were there before. But some judges and justices refuse to follow for different things. Maybe in their own views, I can draw a distinction between this and that. So it causes confusion. And it's costly to the process, not just in Nigeria, of course, because we print material severally, but also there. So we want a situation where the laws are more settled. Somebody made reference to it. The judges pronounce the law as is, and there's certainty in the law, and it delivers some kind of justice. So not just INEC, but all candidates, aspirants, political parties are guided by these clear provisions of the law. But it will mean a root analysis going down to the rules of the Constitution, and from the Constitution flows the Electoral Act and other guidelines that we must make clear, practice directions, and those kind of things can be used.
The takeaway from your postulations is the issue of a contradictory judgment. I keep talking about the role of the legal practitioners. So what is their role? You know, at a point we begin to bring in a behavioral theory in all of this. Right. A court of a competent jurisdiction will judge a case, and in the next 1 week, another court of also a competent jurisdiction on the same matter will give a different ruling. So who is it now? The law? Is it the practitioners? Is it the system? Is it the society? You know. So who is wrong here? And I want to bring you in. Who is wrong here?
The only alternative to revolution is law. Law can be used to change culture. Law can be used to change behavior. And that's why civilized societies rely on law, not on violence, not on revolution. Even after a revolution, you have to judge all. You have to sit down and talk. We are fortunate we have a National Assembly. If I like the current House of Representatives, I have seen the kind of things they are talking about. Things that are progressive. If they can come together, select some good people, experienced people from INEC, some senior lawyers who are seasoned in the use of electoral law, and then create a new legal framework for elections. It can be done. It's not rocket science. We did it for criminal justice. We couldn't try high-profile cases until 2015. We wrote the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. Yeah. Unfortunately, the National Assembly passed it. And the President Goodluck Jonathan signed it into law. It is because of the Administration of Criminal Justice Law Act that we're able to try high-profile defendants. The criminal justice system was powerless against high-profile defendants until 2015. Now, we can do the same for electoral law. It can be done. It's not rocket science. We know the problems. Uzi has been in INEC for such a long time. Ask him to give us what are the major challenges, reduce it into law. And then get the civil society, put it in the National Assembly. My brother says we cannot, it's the politics, it's our politics. If our political elite decide that we want to do things right, and now we have an opportunity. The ruling party has majority in the National Assembly. You know, so this is an opportunity. And they promise Nigeria change. If they don't change the electoral process, they are going to be regarded as blatant failure. Under PDP, the electoral system was completely went into doldrums, complete confusion. They thought they would be there for another 50 years. But the chicken has come home to roost. They are now in the minority. So if the incumbent party does not take advantage of the fact that they now have relative majority in the National Assembly and take a critical look at the system to reform the... Look, there's nothing INEC can do. INEC is almost a victim of the system because you give them a law that is bad to operate. And we can't blame the judges because of the pressure that the politicians bring to bear on the judges. They use money where they are not accepting money. They want to kill them. They want to threaten their family. They want to remove them from office. So I think it falls back on the table of the political elite. Those who can change the law, those who can change the constitution. Fortunately, we have seen parts of the constitution changed. And the presidents have assented to some of these provisions. If we continue to amend this electoral law, sir, as you rightly said, we are coming back to square one. Let us take the Waste Panel report, bring it up to date, and launch it. Then international observers, everybody says, this is the standard we're going to be governed by. And then reduce the political, the benefits, the perquisites of office. What drives this impunity? What drives this violent behavior to capture state power? Because you get there, maybe you are just a school cert holder or you are an unsuccessful businessman. You can use thuggery, you gain political office. Within a short time, you become a multi-millionaire. You become the big man that everybody is kowtowing to. So I think we need to, sir, NTA, you have done a great job by addressing this issue. Let's go to the election. That is the root of the system, the constitution and the electoral law.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. Honorable Shaba, there's another aspect. We've talked about it sometimes on Good Morning Nigeria. Now, this aspect relates to the conduct of election. Now, there are some other persons who would also draw attention to, it was part of the mandate given to, the charge given to the Waste Panel, proportional representation, that the current system of winner take all is what also fuels the violence. So if we had proportional representation as the electoral system, which will be governed by law, depending on the aspect that we're talking about, might that help? In other words, you win a seat on the basis of the proportion of the votes that your party has already scored in the election. Not that you stars, SAN, scores 1,000 votes and then you score 999 votes, your 999 votes get wasted. Rather than say, okay, add the two votes together, how many sisters there, split it, and then you guys get the number of seats you're supposed to get. What's your take? Closing thoughts now.
Okay, I'd just like to go back to something Prof mentioned. And I'll say that somehow we seem to be enmeshed in this vicious cycle. Prof seems to have tied everything, maybe because he's a professor, to the law and its amendment and the need to change. I still maintain, with considerable degree of conviction, that the issue is strictly not about the law. This is the only country where after every phase of election, there is one amendment or the other. If their lordship forgot their cap at home to arrive in court and you get there, somebody raises it, it becomes an issue, you are triggering a constitutional amendment. We have not, I stand to be corrected or challenged, there is no, after every successive election, there is one amendment or the other to the Electoral Act, proposed to the Constitution. We cannot continue like that. I want to say with all due respect, sir, if you take a critical look at the elections that were conducted under this 1979 Constitution, for instance, that we so much deprecated at that time. I mean, strip of all the amendments that have taken place between that time and now. The elections we have now, are they more credible? It's not about, we have sufficient laws. If you ask me, I mean, fundamentally, sir, how many of us are even willing to, let us even agree that we don't have, the ones that have been made, how many times have we complied with them? All right. We need to change the mindset. We need to institutionalize a system of punishment and reward that no individual is able to, tamper with. Otherwise, we may continue to grow.
All right. I think time, just 10 seconds. 10 seconds, please.
Yeah, you see, I have this view, and it's simply this. Unless we realize the fact that you don't allow anybody who has scored some votes to go home free, litigations will continue and will continue to be expensive. In other words, somebody who has some votes should be allowed to have a say in the governance. Without that, we are going nowhere. Okay. And no. Please.
You are shifting. You are shifting. You're talking essentially about proportional representation.
And somebody who is next to the other person. If the other person is declared governor, the other one must be declared the deputy governor.
At this point, we'd like to first of all appreciate Yunus Ustaz Usman Esen. I would like to thank you for your contribution this morning. We may have a second edition of this very topic, and we hope to bring you back then. So you have more time to talk on this.
I will send my bill.
Your bill. Well, Shaba Ibrahim, we'd like to thank you too. You're a beneficiary of litigation this time around. We wish you success.
Pro bono.
All right. I would also like to thank our man who is regular here, the Director of Publicity and Voter Education at the INEC, Oluole Osaze Uzi. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
And of course, the Professor of Law, Professor Yemi Akinshe George, he sounded so differently this morning. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Kyria, you didn't thank me as well. Since you are the only odd man.
Because you are like, okay, I appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much, Kyria.
Now, we have come to the end of this edition of Good Morning Nigeria. I'd like to thank you indeed for being part of it. We'll see you again tomorrow. My name is Kyria Umayo.
And I'm Kingsley Osama. Do have a lovely day.